Introduction to Climatology. Weather and climate are dynamic features of our physical environment. They affect a wide range of human activities to a greater or lesser degree. There is no denying the fact that weather and climate are important factors in determining our day-to-day and longer-term activities and modes of life. Though it would not be desirable to produce an exhaustive catalogue of climatic impacts, it is true that the ways in which the elements of climate and weather control various forms of economic and social activity are now receiving ever-increasing attention from climatologists. Moreover, human society has developed to such an extent that its activities unintentionally produce weather and climate modification on a larger scale. Besides modification of local climate, highly sophisticated human activities have the potential to modify global climate. These modifications may lead to a serious meteorological consequences. Today, man is seriously speculating on the future possibilities of climate control on a global scale. On completion of this module, you will be able to understand what is climatology, understand the need to study it, understand the aims, objective and scope of climatology. Climate is a key to regional differentiation. The ultimate goal of geography is the scientific analysis of regional diversities and the spatial variations found on the Earth's surface. In other words, geography aims at the correct and systematic appraisal of the interrelationship between man and his environment. Moreover, critical analysis of the diverse environmental effects makes it clear that a climate is the most fundamental and far-reaching of the natural elements that control human life. The mode of life and the economy of people in tundra are altogether different from what they are in other regions of the world. Climate undoubtedly holds the key to regional diversity. Climate and human affairs. Of all the factors of physical environment which influence the life of man inhabiting the planet Earth, the most important and the most fundamental is climate. Its influences are so varied, so subtle and all-pervading as to defy complete identification and analysis. The clothes we wear, the houses we build for shelter, the food we eat, the occupation we follow, migrations from one part of the earth to another, and even the very mode of living, every aspect of human life is more or less controlled by the climatic conditions in which we live. Climate and civilization. The climate hypothesis of civilization as propounded by Ellsworth Huntington, climatic determinism, assigns a very high place to climate, which is considered to be the most dominant and essential factor in the development of civilization. This hypothesis assumes that we are what suns and winds and waters make us. The races of earth are like trees. Each according to its kind brings forth the fruits known as civilization. It is historical fact that many advanced civilizations in the past have grown up and flourished in different regions of the world, having dissimilar climatic regimes ranging from hot and barren deserts of the Nile Valley to the extremely cold highlands of Sweden. But as and when the climatic conditions changed to become adverse, those civilizations decayed and ultimately perished. The climatic influences are threefold. Firstly, climate has direct bearing on man's health and activity. Secondly, it has strong indirect but immediate effect through food and other resources. Lastly, climate has been the most dominant factor in causing migrations, racial mixtures and natural selection. Climate and political organization. Climate is such a potent factor that even the political organizations are not immune from its effects. An example may be cited from the United States of America. Here, the climatic differences between the northern and southern states were indirectly responsible for the Civil War. The agrarian southern states with their large cotton plantations wanted cheaper labor to work for them. Thus, slavery was profitable there. On the contrary, the northern states were industrial and a region of small operator-owned farms. Therefore, a country without a homogeneous climate is bound to be beset with making laws and regulations acceptable to all. Since different types of economic systems demand different laws and regulations, in India, where there is still an agrarian economy, the resurgence of floods and the droughts not only causes immense hardships to the cultivators, but also tells upon the health of the government. The Indian agriculture is still a gamble in the monsoon, whose failure is pulsating character has serious repercussions on our national economy and political stability. Effect of individual climate systems on human life. As we all know, climate is the resultant of all the manifold weather influences. On other hand, the condition and the behavior of the air at a given time and place constitute weather. The air temperature, pressure, direction and velocity of the wind, humidity, the amount of cloudiness and precipitation are some of the most important weather elements. Each of these elements affects the human activities in their own way. Climate conditions have complex bearings on soil, crops, commerce, plant, diseases, and above all, human health. Even the surface of the land is modified to a large extent by the action of climatic elements. Weather and climate. Now let's define them. In climatology, the terms weather and climate have different connotations. Weather. It refers to a state of atmosphere at any given time, denoting the short-term variations of the atmosphere in terms of temperature, pressure, wind, moisture, cloudiness, visibility. Weather is highly variable. It is constantly changing, sometimes from hour to hour and at other times from day to day. Therefore, the aforementioned properties of the atmosphere are subject to constant change, and their state at any time determines the state of the weather. However, weather elements are not separate entities, rather they are closely related with each other. David L. Blumenstock, an eminent climatologist, has defined weather in a more restrictive sense. According to him, weather is the behavior of the lower atmosphere with particular emphasis on those aspects of behavior which affect the lands and oceans and have a marked influence on the organisms that live upon the lands, within the waters of the earth or in the lower air. Climate. Climate is a sum total of variety of weather conditions of an area or a place. Thus, climate may be defined simply as average weather. The term climate denotes a description of aggregate weather conditions. Climate may be defined as the sum of all the statistical weather information of a particular area during a specified interval of time, usually span over several decades. The World Meteorological Organization has suggested a standard period of 31 years for calculating the climate averages of different weather elements. Some of the definitions of climate as enunciated by eminent climatologists will be presented now. Trevarta. Climate represents a composite of the day-to-day weather conditions and of the atmospheric elements within a specified area over a long period of time. It is more than average weather, for no adequate concept of climate is possible without an appreciation of seasonal and diurnal change and of the succession of weather episodes generated by mobile atmospheric disturbances. While in a study of climate, emphasis may be given to the averages, still departures, variations and extremes are also important. Next comes Crutchfield. He says the processes of exchange of heat and moisture between the earth and the atmosphere over a long period of time result in conditions which we call climate. Climate is more than a statistical average. It is aggregate of atmospheric conditions involving heat, moisture, air movement. Extremes must always be considered in any climatic description in addition to means, trends, possibilities. The description of climate started with the division of Earth's surface into torrid, frigid and temperate zones. However, in its present advanced stage, it is looked upon as a set of weather conditions specific to a place or an area which are subject to an annual cycle of large or small amplitude. The value of climatic element by itself does not mean much to a geographer. He is mainly concerned with the transition of the average of elements of climate into certain responses of the living organism. Well, now the history of the word climate. The word climate comes from the Greek word kilma, which literally means inclination. Of all the climatic elements, temperature was considered as the most important by the Greeks. The principal cause of various types of climate found on Earth, according to them, was the inclination of the solar waves. The division of the Earth into 5 climatic zones: torrid, north temperate, south temperate, north frigid and south frigid, is attributed to Greeks, with some considering it the feat of philosopher Hipparchus and others giving the credit to Parmenides. Aims, objectives and scope. The study of climate has threefold purposes. Firstly, it seeks to discuss the elements of climate, their nature, variation, areas or locations of the prevalence and their effects on other natural conditions obtaining there. Secondly, it discusses the climatic features, for example, semi-permanent high and low pressure centers, air masses and their circulation, fronts and cyclonic storms which arise from the distribution of the climatic elements and their interaction with other physical factors. Thirdly, the climate that arises on the basis of synthesis of climatic elements and the global distribution of various climates over the Earth's surface. In the later half of the 20th century, the interest in climatic change has generated a sizable volume of scientific literature on the subject. Subdivisions of climatology. According to Crutchfield, there are 3 basic subdivisions of the science of climatology. Firstly, the physical climatology. It is closely related to meteorology, which includes not only the physics, chemistry and the dynamics of the atmosphere, but also many of its direct effects upon the Earth's surface, the oceans and life in general. Next comes the regional climatology. It seeks to determine and describe the various types of climates. It does statistical analysis of the climatic data. Moreover, while discussing the spatial distribution of climatic elements, regional climatology encompasses the concept of scale as well. On the basis of size and extent of the climatic regions, the world is divided into macroclimatic regions, mesoclimatic regions and microclimatic regions. Next comes the applied climatology. It is concerned with the application of the climatological knowledge to specific practical problems. The main purpose is to find out ways and means to make use of our knowledge of climatic elements for the betterment of human life on the Earth. Because of the rapidly growing literature of climatology and the experience of persons working in the field, there have emerged in recent decades many specialized branches of the science of climatology. They are labeled as agroclimatology, medical climatology, urban climatology, bioclimatology, agriculture climatology, etc. Now let's talk about the elements of weather and climate. The main elements of atmosphere which are subject to change and which influence human life on Earth are temperature, pressure, winds, humidity, clouds and precipitation. Now let's move on to the climatic controls. The variations of weather elements are brought about by the various climatic controls which operate in different combinations and with varying intensities. The following are some of the most important climatic controls. Positions of sun in relation to latitudes of the Earth. The sun, through its insolation, is the main source of energy for the movement of the atmosphere, leading to weather and the patterning of the climates. The inclination of the sun's rays falling on the Earth's surface determines the intensity of insolation per unit area. Obviously, the intensity of insolation or incidence of heat energy per unit area is maximum where sun's rays fall vertically on the surface. The Earth completes a rotation on its axis in 24 hours. Its axis has a declination of 23.5 degrees. The Earth also has a yearly revolution in an elliptical orbit around the sun. These two characteristics of the Earth's movement give rise to daytime shifting of the belt of the vertical sun rays between the tropics of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn during the year, Consequently, the thermal equator moves along with the belt of vertical sun rays. Thus, the temperature distribution over the Earth's surface is controlled by the position of the sun on the latitudes between the two tropics. Lowest temperatures are recorded when the sun's rays are oblique to the maximum in between the poles and Arctic, Antarctic circles. This leads to the definition of the ancient torrid temperate and the frigid temperate zones. The detailed discussion on the inclination and temperature follows that of the atmosphere. Now comes the location of mountains and their altitude. The mountains have varying altitudes. The temperature of the air goes on falling as one goes upward into the atmosphere from the ground. People living in mountainous regions experience colder temperatures than those living in the plains. Quito city on the high plateau of Ecuador and the Kilimanjaro mountain of Kenya, both in equatorial region, have cool to cold climates depending on the altitude. The west to east extending mountain ranges like Himalayas and the Alps act as barriers to the interzonal flow of cold or warm air masses. For example, northern part of the South Asia is protected by the Himalayan range from the cold Siberian air in the winter, while it invades the whole of the China. Himalayan range helps to produce much needed summer rains from southwest monsoon in South Asia. Similarly, north to south oriented Rockies, Andes, Appalachians of Americas and the western Ghats of peninsular India near the coast control the flow of various air masses and influence the climate of these continents or subcontinents in various ways. Next one, juxtaposition of land and water bodies. Large scale zonal flow of moist air from large water bodies, that is oceans, to coastal areas and thence on deep into the large land masses, continents or subcontinents, not only ameliorates the climate of the land areas but also helps to distribute the rainfall over the land. The zonal flow of continental dry air from large land masses to oceans undergoes humidification over the ocean. This humidified air, after circulating over the ocean, may reach land areas and may produce precipitation. Local breezes from the sea, river and lakes also ameliorate the temperature of the adjacent land to a certain degree. These are discussed in detail under the water, wind and air masses. Ocean currents. Ocean currents are generated due to the variation of temperature, density, salinity of water at the ocean surface and the wind. An ocean current is a flow of seizable body of water like a river from one region of the ocean to another. The equatorial waters are warm and therefore in North Atlantic a warm north equatorial current flows from west coast of Africa towards the east coast of South America under the influence of trade winds. Before reaching the east coast of South America, this warm current is deflected north to the higher latitudes as Gulf Stream along western northern Atlantic. The warm current ameliorates the temperatures and increases the rainfall along the east coast of North America. Around the latitude of 40° north, under the influence of zonal westerly wind flow, the comparatively warmer waters of Gulf Stream starts drifting eastwards as North Atlantic drift. This warmer water keeps the harbours of Ireland, England, Norway, etc. free from being ice-bound in winter, and thus these are open to navigation all year round. However, the influence of warm North Atlantic drift is felt deep into the northwestern Europe because of the westerly flow. On reaching the west coast of Europe, North Atlantic drift bifurcates. One branch goes towards the North Sea as warmer current and the other branch is deflected southwards along the coast of France, Spain, Portugal as a comparatively cooler current. It is called the Canary current, which ameliorates the temperatures as far south as tropical west coast of North Africa. Canary current ultimately merges into the North Equatorial current. The polar seas generate cold currents, for example, Labrador current off the west coast of Greenland. It flows southwards and meets the Gulf Stream in vicinity of the Newfoundland. The meeting of the cold and the warm waters produces foggy conditions which are dangerous to shipping, while the mixing of these two waters produces rich fishing grounds. Currents similar to the North Atlantic also develop in the South Atlantic, North and South Pacific, and to a certain extent in the Indian Oceans. In some years, a warm El Niño current develops under favorable conditions only in Pacific Ocean. It flows from Papua New Guinea towards the coast of Peru in South America. It is said that it influences the climate of the world during and the following year of the occurrence. Detailed study of the ocean currents is the field of oceanography. Types of weather systems. Of these, certain weather systems as cyclones and anticyclones are large and complex. While squall lines are very small, these systems may release enormous amounts of energy, as in case of tropical cyclones or tornadoes. On the contrary, sometimes these systems are merely local weather phenomena like thunderstorms. Despite wide variations, weather systems actually represent disturbances of the general atmospheric circulation. Man may also be considered one of the controls of weather and climate. Various types of human activities such as cutting and burning forests, building cities, adding pollution by burning fossil fuels to the atmosphere do affect the weather and climate. As we are aware, the much talked about ozone hole is nothing but the impact of human activities on the environment. It is true that cultural changes usually accompany climatic changes. In the above lesson, you have understood the concept of climate and weather, the objective, scope and aims of the discipline climatology, the application of climatology and the importance of study of such a subject in the present